Hey guys, this is Thomas from Stylized Station, and welcome back to the 3D Coloring Book Workshop. And today I'm going to be showing you guys a very special topic, something that was highly requested. I'm going to show you guys how to make some hand-painted style smart materials. So I've made a very simple smart material here, and I just wanted to show you guys just how easy it is to create something like this. And on top of that, I've also added a cool little material that automatically adds paintbrush strokes, and this is totally customizable, and you can make these paintbrush strokes look bigger, smaller, however you want. So I'm super excited about this tutorial, so let's go ahead and get right into it. We're going to learn a lot today. Okay, so I just finished making the tutorial and completing it for you guys, and it looks fantastic. We've got the completely finished smart material for the pickup truck. We've got all this beautiful stylized metal. We've got stylized bone that we made. I showed you guys how to make this glass that's see-through, and it's got some cool gradients on it. The bricks as well. This is all PBR, zero hand painted, and the wood ended up looking fantastic. Ended up looking so much better for basically just a bunch of cubes. None of this is hand painted. It was all completely done through PBR and Substance Painter. So if you want to get the rest of this tutorial and you want to be able to fully finish this, hop on over to the 3D Artist Coloring Book. I'm making new tutorials for this every week. It's going to be covering a ton of assets in a ton of different styles, and I'm super excited to see what you guys are going to create. So feel free to send your finished textured projects of this tutorial over to me at stylizedstation@gmail.com, and I'll probably share them for myself. I'll share them on social media. So that's it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I really hope that you guys sign up and enjoy the 3D coloring book as well, and check out all of the other tutorials that we have on there. I'll see you around. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a gradient to the bottom of the truck that goes all the way to the top, to bring your eye naturally to the rest of the truck in this area. So let's go ahead and add a fill layer, and we're going to right click, add a black mask, right click, add a generator, and we're going to add a position generator. So it's now filling in just from the top down with a white mask based on the color we specify. So let's go ahead and change this to mask so we can see and properly manipulate the mask that we're going to be working with. Now, I want everything to start from the bottom, so let's go ahead and invert it. So now the white is at the bottom, and we can mess and pull back the mask itself to get the effect we want. So I want it to hit about halfway up, and I want this part of the mask to be a little stronger, so I'm going to up the contrast and maybe pull it up to here. So now we've got a nice strong mask and a strong gradient that's going to be very powerful at the bottom of the truck, and that looks good to me. So let's go back and change the material, and now we can change the base color. So press Alt click to isolate the base color channel, and let's choose a nice dark red, and you can see this is around the red that we used. And we go use the gradient, we get a nice dark gradient at the bottom there. Just something like that. And if you want to make sure, and if you want to remove the lighting, and so you only see the base color, let's choose the base color channel, and now you can see just how great that gradient's going to look. So the tires are going to be black, but you can see the mask is kind of kicking in on the bottom here and on the base. So, and it goes to a nice bright red, very vibrant red right at the top. So that looks pretty good to me. So now that we've got a nice looking gradient, it's time to start adding some depth to the actual color itself. So next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding some dirt passes along with some ambient occlusion. So let's go ahead and do the ambient occlusion first. So let's add another fill layer, and we're going to add a black mask just like before. And with our generator, we're going to simply choose the ambient occlusion generator, which is right here. And it needs to be inverted as well, because you can see the mask is covering the non-occlusion parts. So go ahead and press invert, and that looks a lot better. So we're going to be using a very dark color to fill in the edges and the parts of the truck that would actually normally be covered in shadow. So let's rename this to AO, and we'll go to the color, Alt click on the color, And let's change the base color to something very similar to the gradient, nice and dark. So let's go ahead and click the flood fill or the fill, and we'll click on that. And there we go, it's filled in. You can't really see it right off the bat, but when you toggle it on and off, we've got this nice, beautiful ambient occlusion that's generated on the edges. And you can always mess around with it if you want, but for me, that looks pretty good. You can always bring it in a little stronger like that and pull it out. But that's great. So now we've got our first layer of ambient occlusion. Now that we've got the ambient occlusion done, we're not done yet with adding shadows and grunge and depth to it. So there's one easy way to do that, and that's with the dirt generator. And I always recommend stacking up ambient occlusion and dirt to get a much deeper and more consistent feel. So we'll be able to fill in the cracks even in here with the dirt generator. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's add a fill layer, black mask, and we'll add a generator, and we can just locate the dirt generator right here. And that's going to give us much better micro detailing for the actual shadows. So let's change the color and let's fill it in again and make it the same as we've been doing it before. Now obviously this is way too strong. So the good thing about making smart materials that they are fully PBR, so we can pull this back and isolate it and mess around with it as much as we want. So I want it just so it's really starting to appear around the edges here. So let's go ahead and go to the mask, and let's try and pull back the dirt level to a point where it's really just starting to creep up a bit. And that looks pretty good. And let's go to the base color. And that looks pretty good. So now you can see, even with the ambient occlusion, it was still missing that depth. And now with the dirt layer, it's added that just extra bit of grunge and still has enough, or still doesn't add too much detail so that it doesn't look stylized anymore. And by removing all of the color channels and keeping the roughness nice and high, we actually maintain that nice hand-painted look. So even this on its own is a great looking hand-painted base. So now you can see that with the first basically 4 layers, you guys have created something that's already a pretty great looking smart material, and we only really have about 2 layers to go to finish this. After those 2 layers, I'm going to show you how to create those hand-painted brush strokes, and that's only 2 to 3 layers themselves. So this is pretty simple, and that's why I created this. I want to show you guys just how easy this is and help you guys learn to make this. So let's go ahead and create one of the next layers, which is one of my favorite layers, the lighting. So let's go ahead and add a fill layer, and this one's going to be very simple. We're not adding a black mask this time. We're going to make sure we switch the blending mode to soft light, which is crucial, or else this won't work. We'll turn off everything except color, and then we're going to right click and go ahead and add a filter right away, so no black mask. And in this filter, choose the baked lighting filter. And basically what it does is it simulates light onto the actual albedo map itself, which is great for stylized art. So let's turn off the color as well. And now we can kind of start messing around with this filter as well, because the result it gives right away isn't always the best. Now you can go ahead and start by just turning it down slightly, maybe down to 70% because it's a little extreme. And then you can actually mess with the colors itself. So you can turn up the sun intensity, which is the lamp that gets put right on top basically. And I kind of like it there. Let's go into the colors. Base color itself so we can see. And let's see what happens if we change the sun color a little bit. I do like that yellow. So let's maybe do that so we've got a bit of an orange tinge on there. That's very powerful. Let's turn it down. Great, and the sky intensity is a more all-encompassing color, but let's go ahead and keep it like that. And then the lights itself, I don't really recommend messing around with right now, but you can mess around with them and see if you can get some nice gradients on the piece as well. But we'll leave that for now. So looking at this, this is still pretty orange, so instead of just turning down the intensity, let's bring it back up, and then let's just turn down the sun intensity. That orange is a little too strong for my liking. Now, you don't have to follow this exactly, like I've said before. Mess around with it and see what cool colors you can come up with. You don't even really need to texture this, pick up red. the base layer itself can really just be whatever color you want, and then just base it off of, or just kind of tweak everything as you go. That's why I'm doing this for you guys. So let's go ahead and add the final layer. So normally I leave this part, or I normally do this part first right after the base layer, but since there's so much happening underneath, I want to make sure that this layer is right on top so it's nice and powerful and really sticks out. And that is the curvature layer. So let's go ahead and create a fill layer. Now the curvature layer is, it's there to make the edges pop out. So all of the edges here, maybe on the wheels as well, everything's going to pop out, which is very essential when it comes to stylized art. So I'm doing everything I normally do. And let's add a generator, and this time we're going to add the mask builder. No, we're not. We're going to right click and we're going to add, not the mask builder, the mask editor. The mask builder is now legacy, and the mask editor is what's being worked on now. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, there's a lot of stuff you can do with the curvature and with the curvature generator. So let's pull it back a little bit and let's go to the mask so we can see in better detail what we're working with. So balance, I think that looks pretty good like there. And another trick is if you really want to mess with the curvature in the edges, you can go into the curvature drop down and press this arrow, and then now we've got this whole menu of details that we can start working with. So we can pull back the huge details, big details, and you can see now the bigger details are starting to get pulled back, large, and that looks pretty good. Let's go to the base color. And that's still too powerful. Some of the edges are getting washed away, but everywhere else it looks pretty good. So let's pull in some large. Now you guys can tweak this as much as you want as well. Doesn't really matter. I'm just doing it so I get it the way that I like it. And keep in mind this here, these are all going to be metal. They're going to be a different texture. So it's not that big of a deal the way it looks. And let's get a nice color. Let's choose the base layer. And you can see it's popped it in a little bit. And then let's maybe desaturate it just ever so slightly. So you can see, like right in here, we've got a nice curvature that pops out. This is all going to be metal as well, and same with this. But you can see the difference it makes. It just really makes the edges pop out and gives it that extra little stylized look. And I really like the way the orange looks on it. So now that that's done, feel free to go back, tweak everything, and you've already got a great looking material right, like this right here. Let me quickly show you how to wrap it all up. And after this, I think this part's going to be on YouTube. The 3D coloring book guys, I'm going to show you how to make those hand painted strokes. So let's go ahead and right click this, create a smart material, and it should populate in your smart material right here. So it's saved as pickup frame. So now I can safely delete this, and I now have a smart material saved in. So no matter which asset I pull in the future, so all I have to do is drag it and drop it, and now this is automatically created, and it's got everything so I can populate it, I can change values, we can do whatever we want. And now you can apply this material to every material moving forward. And that's the great part about Substance Painter, because you can build this amazing library of pre-made and custom assets that you've already made yourself, and it saves a ton of time. So basically, once you've made something once, you don't really have to make it ever again. Like I've got a stylized plastic in here that, oh, it's only base color selected. Stylized plastic, that's not working for some reason, so we'll ignore that, but you guys get the idea. So I hope you guys learned a lot, and we're going to continue on in the 3D coloring book, and I'm going to show you guys how to make those hand painted strokes, and I'm going to show you guys how to texture the rest of everything. So we're going to get the silver details, the bricks, some stylized glass, the wood, and I'm going to make all the fence and wood from PBR from scratch as well. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that we've created our really good looking base smart material, it's time that I show you how to make those really cool hand painted strokes. So let me quickly pull up the other one and I'll show you which ones we're talking about. It is this look right here. Now it's only 3 layers and it's really simple to do. And I did it while I was messing around, and I just wanted to share with you how to do it. And I really want to see some of the cool stuff you can make with it. You can make these brush strokes as big or as small or however you want with any colors, and it's super fun, and you can turn this into your own smart material as well. So I'm going to show you guys exactly how to do it. So it's going to go right on top of the dirt layer, in between dirt and the baked lighting filter. So let's change this to lighting, and we'll change this to curvature because I always forget. Great. So let's go ahead and click on dirt, add a fill layer, and let's call this hand painted 1. Now this one's super easy to do, and it's only a few filters in here, and then we can duplicate it and move on. So let's go ahead and make sure we're only using the color channel because that's all we're going to be manipulating. And let's right click, add a black mask, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually fill it in with a grunge map of our choosing. So we're going to right click again, and this time we're going to add a fill. And from here you can see we've got this grayscale option that we can drop in, so we can now start picking out grunge maps that we like and drop them in, and you can see that the fill layer gets filled with whatever grunge map we use. So even that, something like that would look fantastic, but we're not going to use that for now. We're going to use what I used, and I think it was in procedurals, and it was called Cells 4. So I found Cells 4 worked really cool with what I was trying to do. So now that we've got this filled in, you can add a bunch of filters to it right away, or you can manipulate the size of the actual map itself by changing the projection type to triplanar projection. So I think in this one we go a little smaller. Let's pull back the scale, something like that. All right, let's try 0.25. Okay, that works, something like that. And we can choose whatever color we want, but for this color, I think I'm gonna go ahead and make it like a nice orange. So let's bring the hue up to orange, and we'll tweak this later, but let's see how that looks. So let's go back to the black mask, and it's time to start adding some filters to manipulate the way this hand painted cell looks. So right click, add filter, and let's go ahead, and the first one, which is pretty crucial, is the blur slope. So where is the blur slope? There we go. And basically it's now starting to mess with the edges of all the material, and even here, if you pull back, you've already got, you know, a decent hand painted material in itself. So you can just see even from this how easy it is to manipulate some of these maps. So we've added the blur slope to it, which we can now increase in intensity. I think it's pretty good at a pretty low number. And now let's go ahead and add one more filter. And this is where you start to decide how the brush strokes are going to look by adding a directional blur. So now we've got these nice big broad strokes that you can now increase in intensity. And so now we've got this beautiful orange brush stroke look that's going across the entire asset itself. Now the UVs on this model aren't perfect, so you can see it doesn't look great here and in some other areas as well, but that's okay. This is a technique that you can use on any asset, so don't really mind it on this one. And see, the intensity is around 0.2, so that's fine with me. And with the cells itself, you can also rotate as much as you want, pull them, get them to look any way you want. And let's add bird directional. That's great. So what I would do is, since this is too intense of a color, let's drop it down to about maybe 50 to 100. There, and that looks pretty good to me. So let's go ahead and go right into the next one as well. So let's go ahead and duplicate this layer, change the color, and then maybe change some values, and we've got some nice, we've got a nice separate hand painted layer. So duplicate layer. You can also press Control D. Now let's change this color to, let's say, yellow, for instance. Doesn't really matter. And now we've got the cells that we can rotate, and we can also scale them to our liking as well. So I would pop them down a little lower, so you can see now we've got some more detail in the brush. And you can pull this down to about 8. So now we've got a nice orange hand painted texture just like this. And it's super important to add multiple levels. And even this on its own looks decent. So there's so much flexibility that we can do with this. And we can increase the intensity of the blur, if we want to increase this a little bit. So they're longer, thinner brush strokes. And this is missing some contrasting colors. So let's go ahead, right click, duplicate the layer again, and then let's choose maybe a blue, like a tealish blue, to make it pop a bit. And just like that, we will drop the intensity or increase the intensity to around here. Mess with the blur slope however you want, and let's rotate it a little bit so we can get some color variation, and maybe have even higher detail in the strokes there. So now this is starting to get washed out, so you can really pull it down a little lower if you want, or if you like the way it looks, keep it nice and high. Doesn't really matter, it's totally up to you. Now the only thing I would recommend is if you start to lose some of the details, you can actually pop them back in. So if you right click, add a filter, and let's go ahead and add a sharpen filter to it, if I can find it. So you might not be able to see it due to the resolution, but the sharpen actually will bring in some of these blue details on top. And you can see right here, you can't really see things, but it'll suddenly pop things into view, especially if you want to sharpen it even more. And that'll give you some nice harsher brush strokes, which I use a lot for pencil strokes. So just like that. Now this was a quick one, and after some tweaking, you can get it to look really great. Like this one, for instance, this was kind of a more finalized one that I worked on. But it's basically the exact same 3 layers, blue, yellow, and orange with the sharpens. And I used a different medieval fabric for some of them. So I highly recommend that you guys mess around with this for yourself and see what you guys can come up with. Now, if you want to create this into a material itself, create another folder, 1, 2, and 3, and highlight everything. Or maybe just drag them in one at a time, doesn't matter. Folder 1. And now we've got a nice hand-painted smart material as well that will work on anything, and you can right-click to create a smart material and it'll create it for you. So let's remove the entire frame itself. You can just drag and drop it again. It won't look great because we don't have the base layer, but it'll add everything to it all over again, which is fantastic. So that's a great way to add some hand-painted smart materials super easily. It's only a few layers. And that's it. So let's go ahead, and we are going to be tackling, let's see, what are we tackling next? The fence. So I'm going to show you guys how to create some PBR and beautiful stylized wood. So hope you guys had fun with this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, so now that we've got the frame of the actual pickup done, let's do the next biggest thing, which is the fence in the back as well. We're going to be using this using 100% PBR, even though we're going to make it look hand-painted with hand-painted strokes. It's going to be fully customizable, and you can tweak it however you want, and you can even save it as a smart material. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to create a folder, and we're going to bring it to above the pickup frame. Close that, and let's just call it fence. And the first thing we need to do is we need to mask it out so we can isolate it. So to see it easier, we're going to add a fill layer into the folder, and you can actually add black masks to folders. So if you don't have separate texture sets, isolating everything like I don't here, this is a great way to do it. So right click, add a black mask, and then let's go ahead and change it to polygon fill so we can see the assets, and we can start clicking on these pieces to isolate them into the fence mask. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So we're going to change it to mesh fill, and if you click on that, since the UVs are mirrored, it starts isolating all the fence pieces, which makes it nice and easy for us to do our job. I think that's pretty much it. That was easy. I think this base part I'm going to keep as the red of the truck, and let's just make sure we've missed nothing else. Missed that guy. And that's great. This is also an opportunity, if anything else is going to be wood on this mesh or in this asset, it's a good time to click on it as well and isolate that, but we're not going to do that. I think we're just focusing on the base mesh, or the base mesh of the actual fence. So now that that's isolated, you can see everything, and every time we change anything, it's only going to be isolated to the actual fence itself. So now we can get started on making the base layer and all the color variations that we need. Okay, so it's time to create the base layer itself and to start adding some color variation in the base layer to get a nice stylized look. So we've already got our fill layer. Let's make sure we remember to turn the roughness all the way up, as we should when we're creating hand painted and very, very stylized pieces. Let's isolate only the color and the roughness, so we're not using anything else. And let's choose a nice bright brown color. So let's choose a very vibrant brown. Let's see if we can get it a little better like that. See if we can add some more saturation to it. And we can obviously tweak this as we go, but that's a pretty good start to me. So this is going to be just our base layer, and we're not going to add anything to it. So let's go ahead and add our first layer of color variation. And there's a ton of ways that you can do this, but I'm going to show you just one way, and you guys can either do it this way or you can start messing around with it yourself. So now that we've got all these colors or this color locked in, let's just press Control D, duplicate it, and let's call it color var 1, and we'll also rename this to base. And let's change the color just ever so slightly. Maybe we'll make it a little less saturated, a little whiter, a little more plain, so that it's not noticeable. And we are going to add a black mask, and let's go ahead and, just like the hand painted tutorial, let's add a fill. And this fill, we're going to be using a grunge, so I think the one I used before was leak. So let's see if grunge leak, spots, let's see if I can find something good. Let's try dirty, and we'll pop it in there. So now you can see we've got some nice little color variation on there. And to make it a little more stylized, you can change the projection to triplanar, and then we can start messing around with it ourselves. You can increase or decrease the scale. I'm going to increase it just slightly like that to introduce a little more size to it. And that looks pretty good to me. So we're going to be doing the exact same thing again and a few times over and over, adding different types of grunges and different layers till we get a nice desired effect that we're looking for. So the next thing I think I want to add is maybe some grain. So since this is just a single polygon or a single shape, it's very simple. There's no normal detail in it. How do you add wood grain to it? And the answer is pretty simple. We can actually create it ourselves using some directional noise like I did before. So let's go ahead and add another fill, only the color, black mask, and let's go ahead and add another fill. And I think we can add some directional noise. So let's see if we go into procedural. And that looks like a good wood grain to me. That doesn't look too bad. So let's go ahead and add that into the grayscale. And that's a pretty good looking wood color. Now if we have, if you want to make sure that it lines up nicely, you can just change the rotation. So now everything's going this way. And let's get a nice color just so it is a little bit darker than the base. So base color, select it, use the fill, base, and then let's drop it just ever so slightly. And let's add some red to it, because why the hell not? And just like that, we've got some awesome color variation. And it already looks like a wood piece, and it's stylized. It looks like it's hand painted, just like that. So in the next one, we're going to be adding some curvature and a little more color variation, and we can call it done. Okay, so we've got a nice looking wood smart material, but we can push this even further. And just like with the truck itself, we can add some curvature to this. So let's show you how to go ahead and handle that, especially when it's a very simple asset that doesn't have much normal information. So we're going to add a fill layer, black mask. Let's also remember to turn off only the color. And then in the black mask, we're obviously going to add a generator with the mask editor. Now you can also just choose the curvature generator, but the mask editor has so much more customizability to it. I recommend using it for pretty much any time you're using curvature. So you can see it doesn't work perfectly with this asset, and that is totally okay. If we pull in the balance to get it to a point where we like, so now we can see where the edges are kind of in, and it's a little bumpy here. Let's go ahead and pull in some curvature, see if we can fix it up a bit. Get rid of the big, the huge, and you can see it's starting to tighten up a little bit. And the large, that looks pretty good. Pull out the soft, so we got, that's not bad looking. And to match this up a little bit, there's a few tricks you could do if you're having issues with it. Obviously, as an artist, you should go back and fix this, but let me show you how to get around it, just for fun. So let's go ahead and add a directional blur. Add a filter and a directional blur, and we want the angle to be going across the grain so that everything is blurred and smudged into this line. So just let's increase the intensity a little bit. And just like that. So now we've got a much more uniform line. We turn it on and off. You can see how it looks much, much, much better. So let's go ahead and add the color. And let's grab the base and just desaturate it slightly. Just like that. So we've got a nice curvature edges that pop. Now, there's tons of stuff you can do to add to this. You can add filters. You can add like a slope blur if you want to get that hand painted look again. And we can pull the intensity down like that, so you can get some nice hand painted curves on it. And you can even move it under the directional blur, so that this is what it looked like before. And then if you had the blur slope under the directional, it's got a nice hand painted look, because hand painted strokes aren't perfect, right? So just like that, that's a nice little trick that you can do. And it's not a perfect solution, but it is such a massive difference. So take a look at how it looked before without curvature. And then adding curvature suddenly gives it that pop, and it looks so much better. So next we're going to be moving into adding some gradients and a little more color variation, maybe some grain. But we've come a long way so far. We're almost done. Okay, so now it's time to add a position gradient to the fence itself. Normally I put gradients basically over top everything at the end of the day when it's done, but today I'm just showing you that you guys can isolate gradients and really customize them to give the result that you want. So let's go ahead and add another fill, isolate only the color, black mask, and we're going to add a position generator just like before. This is a pretty easy step. So let's go ahead and go into mask mode. And this mask is going to be balanced just, oh, let's flip it. Let's get it to go just like this. Maybe like that. So the mask is just starting to touch the base of it. That looks pretty good to me. And let's just add a nice darker color, maybe a deep red. And it's not a huge difference, but it's nice and subtle enough so that it makes a adds a nice little gradient to it. Make it a little more powerful, I think. So let's add the contrast and some balance, and there we go. That looks much better. So now we've got a nice deep red tone and a beautiful light brown right at the top. And that looks pretty good to me. Okay, so we've added a great looking gradient to this, and we're almost done. Now, you could call this done right here, but let's keep pushing this to the next level. I want to show you guys that you can just keep adding layers and layers and layers until you get the desired result. So let's add another color variation layer with some of the techniques that I've been showing you before. Let's right click, alt click to remove only the color channel, add a black mask, and let's go ahead and try and add another level of color variation. I want some more red and red splotches in here because wood's got some nice beautiful red to it. So let's go ahead and add a fill. And I did quite like the cells. So let's go ahead and add a cell to it, and to move it around and mess with it, let's go to triplanar and maybe change the scale to about -2, see what happens. That looks pretty good. So that's going to add some really nice color variation there. And let's add, just like we're doing before, a blur slope to get some nice hand painted strokes in there. And we can add another blur directional, maybe just to go with the grain again. So let's right click and add filter and add a directional blur. And we're going to go this way. Maybe increase the intensity a little bit. We'll see. We'll see how this looks. And let's go exactly 270 degrees. Choose a nice bright red color for this one. Beautiful bright red. And just to show you all the options and all the insane combinations that you can do, let's go ahead, add this to overlay this time. So we're gonna just lay the color right on top of the other colors, and let's drop it down to around the 30s, 40s. So now we've got these beautiful little dark red color splotches in there that are barely noticeable, but they make such a big little difference to the piece, and it looks great. And I'm actually very happy with how that turned out pretty much right away. So since that one was quick, let's go ahead and add one final layer, and then we can call the fence done. So you remember earlier on we added some black grain or darker grain. So let's go ahead and add some lighter grain as well, and that's going to add another layer that's going to really cause it just to pop. So let's see if we can do, which one was it? And this is why it's so important to name your layers. So let's Control C this one, because I believe it was this one. Control V, and let's change the color. Let's desaturate it to a nice white. Lighter color, maybe too white there. Add some brown to it. And that is the correct one. Let's just make sure. Let's get it, see what it looks like over here. There we go. So let's make it a little whiter. And let's add a sharpen to it. I'm kind of making this up as I go just so you guys can see the thought process. And I think if we sharpen it a little bit, that's going to look pretty good. And let's change the directional noise to triplanar and rotate it so it's going against or with the grain. And let's make it a little bit darker, or let's drop the opacity all the way down. So now we've got some nice white grain with it as well to go with the dark grain. So that actually looks really good. So you've got the dark grain there, and you've got the nice light white grain on top. And you can mess around with everything. You can add an overlay with an increased opacity, see if you like that look. But I personally, let's just keep it at normal for now and keep the opacity very, very low. Now you can experiment with it. I don't know how this is going to look, but let's add another directional blur, and let's go this way again. So 270. Let's see, increase the intensity. And that doesn't look too great, so let's just forget about that. But let's leave that around 2 to 3. It's a very subtle change, but I quite like the way that looks. And you can always mess around with putting it in different layers, seeing how it looks, but let's just keep it right on top for now. So that's it for the fence, guys. I hope you enjoyed that one. We're going to be tackling the wheels next. We're going to get a nice dark rubber for the wheels. We're going to add some silver decals. We're going to be adding a nice little Substance Painter decal on the top, a nice little Substance Painter decal stamp on the back, and we're going to be using an already pre-made smart material to do this. We're going to be doing the glass and the bricks, so we still got a ton to go. But look how far we've come so far. This looks fantastic so far, and you should be very proud of yourself for getting this far so far. See you soon, guys. Okay, so the bulk of the work is done. The fence and the pickup truck frame were by far the biggest amount of work that needed to be done. So now it's just wrapping everything up and getting in all these final little details. So let's go ahead and start with the, excuse me, let's go ahead and start with the tires. So we're gonna have to do a bit of masking with this. Now, luckily the UVs are mirrored on each tire, so we do one tire and everything else, or the other three, are also done as well. So let's just focus on this back right one, and you can choose basically anyone you want. Now, just like the fence, the first thing we have to set up is let's get it nice and isolated in a mask. So let's call it tires, and let's add a fill layer. Let's make that, and we'll turn off, we'll put the roughness all the way up again. Turn everything off except color and roughness, and we'll make the basic, let's just make it black for now. just so we can see exactly what we're working with. So right click, and we're gonna add a black mask. And we have a few ways to do this because since the inside of the tire, the rim itself is also gonna be red and then the middle is silver. So there's what I would recommend doing is UV filling and filling the entire tire here like this. And then using the eraser tool, I would erase everything on the inside here just so that the mask underneath pops through. So that would be this mask itself. The pickup frame is directly under it, if you can see when we turn it off. So there are a few ways to do it. I would always recommend, obviously, if you can press polyfill, but if not, this might take a bit of finessing. So you can go to the erase tool and just start erasing some of the mask. So it doesn't really need to be perfect, but we just want to get it good enough so that the mask itself will poke through. And this is a pretty small detail on the truck. So let's not get too twisted about getting it perfect. However, if you are a perfectionist and you want to get it perfect, go right ahead. Now, if you want to get it absolutely perfect, go to your brushes and select the hard brush. And then from there, you can kind of make a lot, or you can make much tighter edges. I'm using the soft brush because it's not going to be perfect and all the mistakes are kind of covered up and they don't look too bad when you're messing around with it. So let's tighten up those. And again, you know, that's not perfect. But for the demonstration, I'm just trying to show you guys speed and how to work quickly, because you guys can always go in and fix this up a little bit later. And to do that, you can also paint in the mask. Again, if you've erased too much, you can go in and paint the mask around the edges. And it gets a little confusing because you're erasing, technically coloring with erasing and then erasing with coloring, but you'll get the hang of it as you do this. So that looks decent, and you can already see that looks way better. And from pulled back all the way back here, it doesn't really matter. So don't go too crazy with the small details, and you can see that the back two are also painted in. So that's pretty much it, and you honestly could leave it there. Going back to my other model, it wasn't really there wasn't really too much to it. So let's just go ahead and add a single layer. And see how it looks and see if we can add anything to it. So let's go ahead and add a fill layer, add a black mask, and let's add a generator, and let's just add a curvature generator to see if we can make these edges nice. Or let's add a mask editor to see if we can make these edges look decent, at least. So something like that, so the edges pop out. Great. Make sure we turn all the color off. And let's change the color just slightly lighter than the base. So let's go ahead with the black and up the value just ever so slightly. So if you want to do that, go for it. That doesn't look too bad itself. So we're also going to cheat a little bit, and since we've got a nice black material, we'll go ahead and look on our model and see if there's anything else that's going to be used by this black material. And I don't really see much, except the window wipers would be perfect for it. So instead of creating a brand new material for it and masking it out, let's just click on the black mask and then go to model fill, and we can click on them. And since they're mirrored just like that, we've now got the window wipers, which are also done. So that's pretty simple. The hubcap in the middle is going to be part of the silver decals, which is next. So let's go ahead and tackle that. Okay, so this is coming together really nicely. So let's go ahead and start adding some of the silver decals. Now I'm going to add silver here on the hubcap, and the tire, on the handle, everywhere. So this is going to be a pretty quick one, and we're going to make a nice stylized metal for that. So let's go ahead and create a folder, and you can call it metal decals, doesn't matter. So let's go ahead and, just like before, let's get the masking set up. So let's add a fill layer in here, just like that. So we can see what we're masking out, and add a black mask to the entire folder. So now we can start going into polygon fill and polygon select, and we can start selecting all of the things that we want to be silver. So First thing that's pretty obvious is going to be the headlamps or the rear view mirrors. The pieces up here, they're going to be filled in nice and silver. This piece, ooh, okay, so I'm going to have to do that manually. That's okay. The centerpiece here, the grill, each individual grill is isolated. So let's pick all the grill pieces. Let's see what else. The bumper and the two bumper pieces holding it together. Can make that piece under there if we want to as well. The handrail or the clips holding everything in. The cap, that will stay silver. And this, why not? Let's add everything. And I like that those are going to stay red. Add this box. Don't forget this guy, because that's not mirrored, I guess. Oh. Okay, well, I can't select that, but that's fine. And I think that's pretty much everything. What else are we missing here? We can add some silver. Maybe on these guys too. Why not? So, oh, there we go. So it wasn't letting me select, but there we go. So now that's fixed. The only other thing that we would want to add is the metal hubcap as well. So let's go ahead into paint mode. And since we're selecting the mask, that's pretty much it. You just get a nice big circle over top of it. And then now we've got everything, I think, that we want to be metal, nice and isolated. Oh, let's add that. Okay, so since this UV is, I guess, entirely connected, we'd have to do this one at a time, which is fine. But let's just go triangle fill, and we'll just quickly click these all in. Sometimes there is quite a bit of manual work needed, but so far this piece has been very, very easy to do. Click everything in. Just make sure that you can also drag and highlight things, but you have to make sure that when you do that, it will get everything that's behind it as well. So I'm just taking my time and being super careful, doing everything one at a time. And as you start texturing stuff like this, you're going to start to learn how to set up your model while you're modeling for success so that you don't have to do stuff like this. So actually improving your texturing skills is also in a way going to be improving your modeling skills, which is cool. Okay, so that's done. And I got one in there, so we can just erase it. Instead of right clicking it, we'll just erase that. And that looks good for me. Okay, great. So now the mask is isolated. We can get to work on actually creating the stylized material. Okay, so now that we've got it masked out, it's time to actually start texturing the stylized metal that we're going to be doing. You can't really just turn down the roughness, up the metallic, and you're done, just like that. With stylized art, there's quite a bit you need to do to get everything set up. And there's a ton of flexibility with stylized art, so let's see what we can do. First, let's change the metallic to 1, which we've already done. We can increase the roughness. You can go as high as you want, really. I would stick around 0.4 for now. So you've still got that nice little reflectivity, because why not? What I would also recommend is not going straight white with the base color. Let's add a nice little blue tinge to it, like a light blue, because steel looks great when it's got a nice light blue look to it. So just like that, we've got a pretty good start for the base color. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a fill layer. Again, right click, add a black mask, and let's add a fill, and let's add some variation to it. With the grayscale, let's choose a color like, or choose a grunge like, maybe concrete one would do well. We just need some smudge to it. Let's see. Let's go ahead with this one and see how it looks. So we've got some nice grunge added on there. And let's go ahead and change the scale so it's just a little lower resolution. And it's just adding some detail to it. Now let's see what happens if we mess around with the color. Color itself looks good. Let's add some roughness, as grunge itself is going to be slightly rougher than the metal. And let's try and add maybe a bit of brown to it. A little darker. Yep, just like that. It's a little too dark if you ask me. So instead of making it lighter, you can add the opacity, pull it back. So it's just got a nice little sheen just like that. And you can confirm everywhere else that it looks pretty good. Which it does. That looks pretty good to me. Okay, great. So let's just tackle this all in one go. So the next thing we're going to do is let's add some curvature to it, just so everything pops. So the curvature layer is very important on metal, mainly because edges of the metal pretty much always get worn out over use. And if you're trying to tell a story with your texturing, it's super important to make sure that you add some curvature to it. So let's increase the contrast, increase the balance, try and get it to a point where it looks decent. Turn off everything but the color. And let's go ahead and look at the mask map so we can try and fix it a little bit. So let's go into the mask editor and let's mess with the curvature settings, and we're going to get rid of all the big ones. Big, large, medium, they don't really need to be there. We just want to get it almost like this, but we want to make sure that everything that's going to be using the metal has got a nice curvature map to it. That looks great. That looks really good. And I'm pretty happy with that. That looks good to me. Let's take a look at that box on the other side. Great, so we've now got a pretty easily, using Substance Painter, built a nice looking mask. Let's go back to the material and see if we can mess around with the color to get it the way we want. So how does it look? There we go. Just make it pure white, I guess. That looks okay. And we can increase the roughness or decrease it. I'd say increase it a little bit. The rougher edges are going to be typically a little more worn down. And you know what? That looks pretty good to me. So the next thing we're going to add is, since these are very small details, we don't really need to get into gradients and ambient occlusion, but we can add a nice micro detail dirt pass to make all of this metal look really good and nice and grungy. So let's go ahead and add that black mask and add a dirt generator. And let's make it a nice dark color. Turn it into a nice dark red or dark brown. And that's a little extreme for me. So let's pull back the dirt level. Let's go take a look at it in the mask so we can see how this is going to look. And that may be just enough to make a difference. And I'm pretty happy with that. And you can see in the grills, now we've got some nice grunge buildup in the grills. And that really adds a great effect to it. And I'm very, very happy with that. That looks pretty good to me. So for the last thing is we're going to add a quick little substance decal on here. And let's add a little substance decal on the back, and you guys can kind of mess around with it. You don't have to do it exactly like I do it. Please feel free to add details and height information everywhere you want, but I'm just going to show you how to do it, and then you guys can go nuts. So let's go do that now. Okay, so let's cover how to add some decals and more information to your assets. So I'm going to add a nice big decal here. So instead of a fill layer, let's create a regular layer. And from here, let's make sure we've got all the options correct. So let's turn the height down to about here. Let's choose a nice red base color. The roughness doesn't really matter. And the metallic can stay at 0 for now. So let's go into the alphas tab and we can pick a cool little decal that we want. I think I already know the one that I want. Let's see if I can find it. And I like this one right here. And all you have to do is hover over it and click in, and just like that, since you've set the height, now it's also set the height information in there as well. So that's a pretty simple way to do it. And just keep in mind, since we're in the silver decal mask, you can only do it in the silver decal. So if we try it on the pickup truck, it won't work. So one more thing, let's add a nice little one to the license plate at the back. Let's see, you can always add a cool little caution sign, or you can import ones that are your own. But for me, I guess it doesn't really matter. Let's do the caution sign. Sure, why not? And you can increase it a little bit. And maybe we can rotate it slightly. That's okay. This is just a demo. So there we go. We've got a nice little caution on the back. And that looks pretty good. I like it. Okay, so that's just quickly how to add some decals. You can obviously, there's a ton more you can do with it, and I will be covering decals and normal information and painting on normals in future tutorials. But just as a quick little tutorial, create a basic layer and mess with the height, and there you go. You can stamp some stuff on. So that's pretty much it for the silver decals. The only last thing we really have to tackle in this is adding the bone material onto the pickup truck and then creating a light as well. And that's pretty much it for this texture set. The other two things we only have are the boxes and the bricks and the glass. Now I'm gonna make those three super quick. So once this bone is done, we're pretty much good to go. Okay, so the hard part's done. It's now to finish up the, let's finish up the bone here. Let's create a folder and we're just gonna isolate it. Let's call it bone. Let's get nice and creative with it. And let's add a fill layer to see what the hell we're doing. So black mask, and we can actually go to UV fill, click on these two guys, and that's pretty much it. You're all good. I also want to add the bone to here as well because I can reuse the bone material in the headlamps and with some tweaking. So let's get creative with it. So if you click flood fill, I think it fills slightly too much. Yeah, I don't like that. So I may have to use triangle and manually select that inner circle that I see here. Yeah, I think that's going to work for me. Forgot that one. 2, 3, 4. And now the headlamp's selected. Great. So let's move on right into what we need to do. So let's remove that fill layer because now we know. And let's go ahead and just add the bone stylized smart material, which we already have. Great. So that's pretty much it. The bone smart material is really great. I use it for a lot. So just hop in there and check out what it does. It's just a base and a simple dirt grunge on top of it. Now for the lamp, there's a few ways we can do this. Let's add a layer, add a paint layer, and let's just have a simple white stencil selected, and let's go ahead and just add something to it. Maybe not. Let's not do that. So let's go ahead and add a fill layer. Add a black mask, just like that. And then from there, let's paint it in. That might work a little better. There we go. So I'm leaving in my mistakes just so you guys can see my thought process and how I tackle things. So I'm going to keep that in. And that looks pretty good to me. Now we've got a nice little looking headlamp with some grunge around the outside that we didn't even really need to mess around with. So you can turn off the color if you want. Now that it's PBR, you can turn up the roughness, turn down the roughness, make it fully metallic, which doesn't look too great. Or if you really want to go crazy with it, you can add an emissive just like this with a tinge of yellow. And there we go. We've now got a beautiful headlamp that we also kind of snuck in with the bone. So once you start to learn this product and you learn Substance Painter, there's so many amazing little tricks you can do with it. So that's it for the pickup truck, I think. Next thing we're going to tackle are the bricks, glass, and the boxes. And now I'm not going to do much more. I don't know how to say this. I'm going to quickly go over how to make the boxes. It's going to be very similar to the wood, and I'm going to leave you to your own devices using what you've learned now in this tutorial to create the boxes, and the same with the bricks. There's a ton of cool stuff you can do, and a bunch of cool layers. I'll show you how to do the glass though. So let's go ahead and tackle the glass next.
Okay, so the pickup truck is done finally. So pat yourself on the back. Great job. Now let's tackle the glass. The glass is going to be very simple. So let's go to the texture sets, select glass, and now we're only working within the glass texture set. So let's go ahead and add a fill layer. And first things first, we need to make sure that the glass is see-through. So let's go to the opacity channel and drop it down. So that's pretty easy. The opacity needs to be maybe just slightly higher than that. And honestly, if you really wanted to, you could call it done right there. But you can go a little further with it. So let's go ahead and add another fill layer. And this is going to be basically just our roughness channel. So let's add a fill layer and only select roughness by alt-clicking it. And the roughness can go up, down, doesn't matter. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a roughness grunge to the map right here, or the roughness map to grunge right here. So let's pick something. Let's choose maybe some fingerprints. See if I have fingerprints maps. Yeah. Let's choose something like dusty and add it to that. Let's see if we can get that to be a little more clear. Let's turn off the roughness there. Increase the there we go. So one thing I forgot to mention, metallic should be set to 1. So that's my fault for not mentioning that. But now you can see the roughness grunge is now applied. So that's the roughness layer. So that looks pretty good. What you can do is UV projection, change it to triplanar and increase it a little bit to get a higher resolution, or a lower resolution almost, so there's less details. If you really want as well, you could also just add a filter and blur the map out. So let's go ahead and add a blur filter. And that, not bad there. So now that's, you've got a nice stylized glass there. And increase the opacity just so you can see a little better. So far so good. Let's add just one more layer, and this is going to be a nice and simple one. Let's add a nice gradient to it. Why not, right? So let's add a fill layer, add a black mask, and then all we're going to do is add a position generator and invert it. So we're going at the bottom. Let's pull the balance back, and just like that, easy as that, we've got a nice little gradient. You can also change the color to black or white, but I personally I kind of like the way that looks on its own. That looks pretty good to me. So that's a great way to add some a nice stylized look to your glass and your see-through stuff. Try and add a gradient if you can. Let's see if I can get that go a little higher up. Great. Pull back the opacity if that looks any good. And I don't really like the way this mask looks, so you can always mess around with other ones. That looks way better to me. Pull the balance back. And okay, I mean, I'm pretty cool with that for now. So that's the glass, super easy. Just make sure that with glass, there's only a few components to it. The roughness is the most important one. And if you want to add a gradient, don't forget to do that as well. And you can always add the gradient and make them different colors so you can see. You can add a nice little tinge to it. I tend to add blue tints as well. But for now, that's enough. So let's go ahead and start the last two things. These are kind of extra pieces. So let's go ahead and let's do the actual bricks. And I'll show you a quick way to do them just for fun. Maybe a different alternate texturing possibility for you guys to use. So let's go do that. Okay, so now we're pretty much wrapping up here. I'm going to quickly go over the bricks using the techniques we used in the past. Feel free to practice on the bricks using your own techniques that you've learned now to see what kind of cool results you can get. I'm going to be sharing all the coolest textures and people who've done this tutorial, some of the best pieces of work that have come from this. I'm going to be sharing them on Instagram and social media, so please feel free to send them to me. So let's go ahead and choose the bricks from the texture set list, and now we can start working on them. So let's add a fill, make this nice and quick. Let's go ahead and let's do our first base layer. So let's make it like maybe a darker camouflage green with a bit of gray to it. Add some more gray. Maybe a touch of blue. Sure, something like that. You can always change it.
Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some color variation. So let's mess around with a bit and see what kind of cool stuff we can make. So let's add a black mask and let's add a fill just like before. And let's see if there's any cool procedurals like camo. And there are. So let's go ahead and choose the camo and drag it in. And so just like that, we've got some cool color variation on there already. And you can always pull it back a little bit so that it kind of meshes. But let's go ahead and change the base color. Maybe let's make it a little more blue because this is pretty heavy in the green. A little more gray. This does have a little too much green to it. I prefer the blue. There we go. And that's not bad, just like that. That's pretty easy. So let's make sure that on the base layer where we've got the roughness correct. So let's increase that and turn everything off except that in the roughness. And then we're only working in the color channel from here on out. Now you can mess around with it. Let's add a blur, see if it looks good. If it doesn't, that's fine. Got a nice little blur to the edges if you want, or you can keep them nice and sharp. It doesn't really matter. I'll keep a bit of a blur in there. Next thing is let's make these edges pop. So let's add a curvature. Add a black mask, add a generator, and let's add a mask editor. And that looks pretty good to me. Let's pull the balance back slightly. And let's do the color. Let's make sure it's just slightly lighter than the base layer and slightly more saturated. Great. That's looking pretty good already. And the next thing is let's make sure we have a nice little gradient on there because the bottom of the bricks are going to be much dirtier than the tops. So let's go ahead, add black mask, add generator, and I'm moving a little faster now because you guys should get it by now. Flip it so it's going from the bottom, and let's find that balance where it just starts to touch the bottom, and we can pull up the contrast just a little bit, just like that. And from here, let's turn off all the color and let's make it nice and dark, maybe like a dark green. And we can make it multiply if we really want it to be a little darker. So that's not really making a big difference. That means we need to fix the gradient. So let's up the contrast even more. There we go. And we'll pull it back just ever so slightly. And there we go. Let's also change it back to normal. And just like that, we've got a nice little color gradient on the bricks. And if you really want to go in and make sure it looks great, let's grab the mask and we can tighten it up a little more. So it's a contrast, let's pull it. I do like the contrast the way it is. And that looks good to me. So let's just take out just the base color. And that's a little too dark. And let's move it slightly down. Just like that. Awesome. So since this is such a small detail, we're not really too concerned about adding micro details. But it would be important to add some ambient occlusion and grudge in there. So let's go ahead and just add a dirt generator. Right click, black mask, right click, generator. Let's add a dirt generator. We'll make this a nice dark red color. Maybe get it a little so it looks a little rusty. And we're going to pull back the dirt level pretty far back. And we can pull back the contrast a little bit as well. And that green and red does seem to mesh pretty well. So that's a nice little, we've just added some nice little dirt micro details on there. Let's go back to the material to make sure it looks good. And that's pretty much it for the bricks. That looks pretty good to me. So the only thing we have left are the wood blocks in the back. And then this guy is totally done. Okay, so we're pretty much at the finish line now. Let's just finish up the boxes and we can call it a day. I'm glad I managed to get so much detail into this. I think this was like 20 parts or something like that. So we can do this pretty easily. We can either start from scratch or using the magic of smart materials, let's go back to the fence, right click our fence. That's what we use to make this. And let's create a smart material. So now we can go back to the boxes texture set and drag and drop it right in. And we've got a nice little smart material that's pre-made and ready to go. So you can start messing around with the colors and whatever you want to do to get your desired effect. I'm going to desaturate basically everything. You could also just put a levels on it
and desaturate the entire thing, but I like doing this by hand because I want to see how everything looks now that it's a little lighter. We can add some yellow, some yellows into there. I want this one to be a little lighter. And you can always go in and change these gradient maps or the grayscale maps. So let's go in and grunges, and that was a leak one, eh? So let's go ahead and it doesn't really matter, I don't think. Now we've got some cool leaks on top. Let's make that nice and dark. Great. Let's add a directional noise. Even that looks pretty good like that. And let's change that to normal. See what it looks like. Okay, so that's going to need to be overlaid for sure. But let's change this overlay. Maybe we can go a bit of a different direction with this. Make it a little bit of a darker blue. These boxes are a little more grunge. And from there, you can tweak it, do whatever you want. You can add some final details to these assets, and that is pretty much it. I think from here, obviously there's a lot of tweaks that you can do. Spend some time messing around with it, figuring out what you can improve, how you like the colors. Make sure that you're messing around with the studio lighting as well. So you're going from panorama, make sure to try the studio lights, because that's going to give you a more realistic look of the textures, how they're going to look in with neutral lighting. But that is pretty much it, and I hope you guys learned a lot. You've made 4, 5, maybe 6 smart materials. You've made the truck. You've made stylized metal, which you can save as a smart material. Stylized wood, which was used twice. The brick material is also a great material for stone as well. And you can reuse those for pretty much every single project, including the glass. So thank you guys so much for listening. I'm going to try and make these tutorials every week, or at least multiple times a month. And that is everything. So thanks for sticking in for the whole video, guys. Thank you so much for being a part of the 3D coloring book, and I will see you guys in the next one.